Hi all. So today's webinar is about uh, one of our students who aced the GRE, right? So Harneet is here with us today. Harneet is an IMS student and he scored a 331 on GRE with a 169 on quant, a near perfect score, and 162 on verbal, right? He's a BA Eco and Stat student from St. Xavier's College in Mumbai. And without further ado, I'll welcome Harneet uh, to the fore here, and I'll let him introduce himself. Yeah. Hi,
Um,
Harneet.
hi guys, I'm Harneet. I am a third year student at St. Xavier's College. I study economics and statistics, and I gave the GRE for an economic master's course that I am planning to apply for the next year.
All
Hi.
right, great. Yeah, if you want to add something more to it.
Let's add later when the webinar proceeds.
Okay, cool, cool. All right, so let me just obviously welcome Harneet here. And throughout the course of this webinar, Harneet will take you through his journey of GRE prep and also talk a bit about the relevance of GRE and how he's making a few decisions with respect to his application process. So he'll throw some light on that as well. And we'll also talk about, as many of you are very kind of cautious of taking the online GRE route. So Harneet will talk about that, as well as he's one of the people who took the online GRE, and it worked wonderfully well for him. So he'll talk more about that as well. And yeah, so let's get underway. So Harneet, for the starters, can you tell me why GRE? How did GRE come into the picture for you? What made you write
Uh,
GRE?
I think like for any masters in economics course abroad, I think GRE
Right,
is most requirement. So I
right.
think my choice of course dictated the necessity for me giving the GRE. So yeah.
Okay, if you can elaborate on that, because a lot of us, though a lot of us are familiar with the fact that GRE is an exam that they have to write if they want to pursue masters from abroad. Can you elaborate on why, that there's a process before that that needs to happen, which is probably a clarity from a student's end as to what they want to pursue, and based on that, whatever GRE score that they target. Yeah, if you can throw some light on that.
Okay. So yeah, most of us, a lot of people that I know, they're giving GRE because like a safe option. It's just like a 5 years stuck valid here, so let's keep
Hmm.
and give it. But
Right.
ideally, that's not how it rather should be because the choice of course will dictate what your target score is going to be like. So
Hmm.
if you are going for something like a master's in economics, so I targeted the master's in economics course because I want to pursue a PhD later on. That is
Hmm.
why I had to keep my quant score a lot high. That's why I practiced for quant more. So your
Okay.
choice, of course, your clarity with what you were supposed to do in the future, that will kind of guide your practice through as well. So I think that's a really important factor. Like you need to do all the research that you can with respect to the universities that you're targeting. What are their average GRE scores? So, for
Right.
example, like London School of Economics, that is one of the like the largest master's courses abroad. They accept GRE score of quantitative from like 160 to above. But
Hmm.
something like Oxford and Cambridge, they want something 165 above. So since you want to obviously diversify your course, your scores a bit, so obviously
Right.
you will have to target a higher score for that. So I think you need to do the research about what is it that exactly you want to pursue, which field, and does it require more of quantitative base or more of a verbal base, and that is how you have to prepare for it.
Okay, I think that's wonderfully put. So one of the things, just to kind of summarize it, and one of the things that will actually stand out in Harneet's case in today's webinar is the clarity that he had from the beginning as to what he wanted to target, and that in turn led to the clarity as to what is the kind of GRE score that he would require. And because one tends to apply for more than one colleges, which might have varying averages, but anything, as he mentioned, uh, so 162 can be an average GRE score for a particular college. It might be 165 above. Though Harneet ended up acing it 169, which is on the safer side for any college that he might apply to. But it's the basis of it was a well done research, and a great GRE score is a score that sees you through getting that admit that you require, right? It's not the end itself, it's a means to an end. So that was very informative. So if any one of you is still not clear as to what they want to pursue, please kind of do a bit of research on your own end. Yeah, we'll be able to help you as well, like Harneet did. He was very clear as to what he wanted to pursue from which colleges, which led him to kind of start the journey. Okay, so thanks Harneet for that. And can you tell me, when did you start with your GRE prep? Yeah.
So I enrolled for the IMS course in February. So my
Okay.
classes started in mid or late February. I don't remember exactly. So it started then, and I was supposed to give my GRE in July, but it got delayed a bit because of the a lot
Yeah.
inconveniences that were there, and I didn't
Yeah.
know how the online GRE process also works.
Right.
Like Anshuman also mentioned that a lot of us are wary of the online GRE thing. So even at that point, I was a bit apprehensive of that too, but I will come to
Okay.
that later on.
Yeah.
So yeah, so I started in February. My classes ended in April. I think the last few bit of classes were online because everything shut down.
Hmm.
And then after that, it was just practice and mocks. So I gave my GRE on 9th August.
Okay.
Yeah, so February to August is the period that I prepared.
It was the first attempt that you wrote, right? You've only written a single. Okay, that's wonderful. So, okay, so your classes ended in around April or May, right? Towards the end of April, I'm guessing. And you wrote the GRE in July, or
Hmm.
rather in August. You were initially planning to write it in July. Okay. So I think that's a very smooth transitioning, because even because of the delay, which happened because of the uncertainties surrounding, obviously in this pandemic period. But still, you rather manage the classes and the post class prep rather soon. So can you tell us what was your strategy like when you were doing the classes? How did you approach, practice along with the studies in your college? How did you manage that?
Okay, so I started in February, and most of us like the college portion is already done, so it was a bit relaxed then. So as the classes proceeded, like what I did was I was just regular to the classes. The in-class prep needs to be really well. So
Right.
as I think in-class prep is taken in the class, so you don't need to do it. There is some homework that you can do after that.
Hmm.
So what I did was during the class, I just solved the in-class prep, and after the whole IMS, the classes were done. Then I took time to revise that again, and then do all the post-class
Hmm.
kind of sequences. So
Okay.
that's how I proceeded. And after that, after the entire thing was over, like the IMS classes and my material was exhausted, then I
Hmm.
started giving mocks, which is really important because once your material is exhausted, only then you should start giving the mocks. Then you will
Yeah.
see
Yeah.
how
Yeah.
you are standing. So then I started giving mocks. I gave 2, 3 mocks. Then I found how where are the areas that I'm lacking in. So suppose like for me, quantitative was more important, so I focused on few areas of quantitative, then searched up for various resources online that will give you extra questions. And even IMS website, the My IMS portal has like topic-wise questions that are given. So a lot of us don't know about that, but there are like topic-wise questions that are given on the portal, so you can solve those. And so yeah, maintaining that thing. And during the month of May, I gave 2, 3 mocks, and then after in June, I just practiced font for a month, did not give any kind of mocks. And then from like the June end, I booked my GRE date. So when I had that target in mind, like suppose now 1 month is there to GRE, then comes your special practice that is basically a lot more targeted than the earlier practice.
Yeah. Yeah.
Basically, in a nutshell, yeah.
Yeah. So there's the entire journey that you shared actually right through the classes. I think the first point that you talked about was being regular, which, as simple as it sounds, is very efficient, isn't it? That, and GRE especially being an exam which is not very, and please let me know if you feel what I'm saying is correct or not, is not very, uh, you know, too subject expertise oriented, if I may put it that way. Yeah.
It's
So
general.
yeah. So They're testing you out for skills that are not just specific to math or verbal for that matter, but probably more than that. And being regular kind of uh, allows you to get into the groove and get more and more familiar with GRE as such, and the style of GRE taking. Now, one very important thing that you talked about, which I think goes amiss and a lot of students do wrong, you talked about the point that you start with your mocks only when you're done with your practice and you've covered the entire syllabus, so as to speak, right? So which is something that I tell the students, because otherwise, if let's say one starts with the mocks parallel to their classes, they still might have that excuse, if I may put it in that manner, that, oh, I haven't done geometry, so that's why I got the geometry questions wrong. Hence, you can't read too much into the mock score, right? And the analysis part of it. Uh, yeah, so regular was the theme for the classes. Once you kind of were done with the classes, the post class practice, I'm sure that was to, and and mostly math oriented is what I'm gathering from your experience, because you wanted a better math score. So for all of those out there targeting the STEM programs, also realize that Harneet was focused on the math score, because that's what is actually more important, especially because he wants to apply for a PhD degree and a doctorate degree later on. It becomes even more important. Can you just throw, and I'll come to the mock analysis part of it in a bit as well. Yeah, so I'll expand on that as well. Can you talk a bit about what exactly were a few things that you kept in mind while preparing for quant? Given that quant was always your stronger suit, what was it that you did to ensure that you maxed out on quant?
Yeah, so first of all, I would just like to say out there that a lot of us really hype up GRE.
Mhm.
Like GRE is like it definitely is very important. It is a set criteria that will allow colleges to screen your applications, but it's not the end of the world. It's not something that needs to be hyped up because it's something that you've been studying since childhood. It's something, it's basic 10th maths. It's something that you've always known and studied. So don't need to hype it up. Don't need to like focus on, you need to focus on the quality of the question rather than the quantity of the question. You need to do smart practice rather than hard work, because I think that really matters a lot. You need to practice different types of questions and some questions from various types rather than solving each and every type of question. So when I
Right,
say that, I mean like there are tests out there that do require you to do like 3-4 hours of studying every single day. GRE is not like that. You just need regular practice, but even half an hour or 1 hour per day would really do. That makes all the difference, because you solve 20 30 questions in one day and that's all, and you feel nice because it's the only thing. It's short and simple, so you then can just do that every single day. So that's something. One most important thing that I kept in mind for quant was timing yourself, because what we forget is that we think that 35 minutes is given, there's just 20 questions, ho jayega. This is something that I faced during my diagnostic test, because 35 minutes is seen like if you do not know your concepts thoroughly, and even if you do know your concepts thoroughly and you haven't practiced enough, 35 minutes is less. So right from the
yeah,
start, even when you're doing the in class or you're doing the post class, do a kind of like a pro rata that say for the post class, I think per topic there are 30 questions that are there in each set.
right,
And suppose like your GRE is 20 questions in 35 minutes. So aim to solve that 30 ka set in together and in 45 minutes only. Like do not exceed the time, because timing is a lot of concern when it comes to GRE, because under pressure, a lot of people just miss out on the time. And this is something that I'll talk about later also, how is the pattern, because one set, which is the first
mm,
font section that you always get, is far bit easier than the second one that you always get.
yeah.
And the second one will
Just I'll just point that out. I'll just interrupt you here for a second. It's always a bit easier for the ones who happen to totally nail the first section. Yeah. So in your case, it was easier, and the second section was tougher. Yeah. Anyway, please
yeah,
carry on.
second section does kind of like throw you off if your first section went well,
Yeah.
because
Yeah.
as GRE is section adaptive test, like not a question adaptive test like GMAT, but your entire section is good, so the next section will be difficult.
Right.
So let's I'll focus on that later. But I think timing is really more important when you're practicing quant questions. So yeah, I think that is one thing that I really kept in mind while practicing quant.
Okay. So a lot of what Harneet said made it just sound a bit too easy. It's easy 10th stuff. So you've done it all the life. It's nothing much. Half an hour a day sounds a bit too easy. So for all of those who are, I think it's relevant because for all of those who are stronger naturally in the quantitative part of it, what it kind of stresses on is that it's not tons of practice that is required, right? It's not a cat which requires you to be a math god totally, which requires really for you to be acquainted with a lot of concepts and really to be a master of it. That's not what is required. Being regular at it, though, is something that is very important. The second thing that he did was keeping a tab on the time management part of it right from the beginning, right? Be it the classes, the post class practice, and obviously the mocks would anyway take care of it. So that was important. And uh, the second section being tougher for Harneet is if you really do well on the first section, the other section is obviously much tougher because it's a section wise adaptive test, and it does tend to throw you off a bit because it gets slightly tougher, especially I'm guessing in data analysis. That's what most of students would say. But about one particular question type, I like to kind of pick your brains, Sunny, because it's a question type that is peculiar to GRE in quantitative. It's the quantitative comparison. Did you have any specific strategies about it? Because a lot of the students out there are always inquisitive as to how should they approach a QC question.
So I think a QC question that really plays with your mind is somewhere that tests the very basic of the skills, which is number properties. So
Okay.
that is a very first chapter in your quant books, and make sure you know how an odd number, prime numbers, even number, they might sound easy. They might sound something that you already know, but they are the ones that are going to like
Trap you,
confuse you
kind of.
because
Yeah.
they are so easy. So they can pick out more questions from that because
Mm.
they are so easy and everyone kind of knows that. So like when they talk about X and Y, when they talk about variables, so you need to know that when you're comparing variables, you can't really gain any information unless and until some relation is already given.
Yeah.
So I just think again, it's all about familiarizing with the concepts that are basic. So when you are doing the pre-class modules, most of the stuff you'll already know, but some properties that you think are quite new or you haven't seen before, or you just you may have seen before, but you're just like, Acha, oh yeah, ye kabhi kiya tha. So
Mm.
just highlight them, just kind of note them down if you
Mm.
can, and then just make sure that while you are preparing for the final days, just revise them again and again. And I think quantitative comparison comes with practice. So both cheese, then you can practice quite well.
Right. So, okay. So a bit of it's a different kind of a question. Hence, you kind of make your own strategies along the way. And yeah, so Harneet talked about, the numbers, obviously. Now, he talked about the fact that the concepts are simpler because everyone knows numbers and fractions and, all that stuff. But still, the questions are slightly trickier because it's something that, really, if you leave any loose ends, this question type will really catch you. So that is one of the things that, you really need to be careful about.
Just to say
Uh,
something
yeah,
there,
yeah.
so especially for something like quantitative comparison, you need to see the questions from all the possible angles.
Yeah,
You
exactly.
can't leave any sort of case. So suppose when you're talking about something like, I'll just give a small example like x is less than x squared. That thing kind of like works for say negative integers, that works for fractions, that works for something that is between 0 and 1 but may not work for something that is more than 1. It's just a very simple example, but these kind of questions do come where they ask you these kind of things. So you need to analyze, you need to break them down. Ki, Acha, okay, there are three different types of numbers that you need to fit and see if this kind of property
Mm.
is working for those numbers or not.
Yeah,
So
yeah, yeah.
that's the thing.
Yeah, so without dwelling too much on quant, but I'll still talk about it because I think Harneet has raised a very valid point here, especially for all of those who are curious about how to handle QC. First of all, QC is very deceptively, it seems like easy, but it's deceptively tricky. And he talked about that you really cannot, you need to be aware of a lot of cases. And he talked about taking 3 to 4 different cases. So, and taking different sets of numbers with respect to whatever the variables there are in the question, uh, I think requires a bit of, that you cannot obviously arrive at an answer by using just one set of numbers. A lot of students do that, but obviously you'll get an answer for only one set, right? You will get to some answer. You really need to counter it out and check whether it holds true. So some sort of habit and smartness will build, and some wisdom would arrive as to how you need to pick out various sets of numbers that Harneet said, 3 to 4 sets, which tells me that he kind of, learned from whatever mistakes he might have made initially, and grew and learned, from his own end as to what is a set of numbers and how not to leave any loose ends, essentially. Yeah. So this was about quant, and you uh, posed the classes dedicated 1 month specifically to quant practice. But you didn't do too badly at verbal either, right? You scored a 162 on verbal. And just tell me your journey as to how did you find verbal reasoning section of GRE? What was it all about?
So for all of my mocks, my verbal was a nightmare because,
Okay,
especially like something like I had a target score in mind that I need to get 160 above in verbal and 165 above in quant. So
right,
that kind of thing is there, and most of the mocks will give you a hard time. They'll never give you above 160 for verbal. They'll give you in the range of 155, 158, 150, but never 160 above, like very rarely. So I think that is where you need to make sure that you're consistent and not getting discouraged because you're getting bad in mocks. Mocks are designed to be difficult.
yeah,
And if you're doing 155 plus or something, that means that you're doing well. That being said, don't be too complacent also. So during the days that were leading to my GRE, like the month before, like that was the month of July. The month of July, I was just focused on learning words because
okay,
if you do not know words, you cannot do sentence comparison, you cannot do fill in the blanks, the kind of thing that is there, text completion.
right,
Because even if you know the context of the question, if you do not know like two out of the three options that are there in each of those blanks,
mm,
you might not be able to fill anything. So that is where you need to be more importantly focused on remembering words, which is something that was initially very boring for me because I just didn't know how to devise a strategy to just learn words for that sake. But
right,
I think what comes important with learning words is you're devising your own strategy. So for some people it might work like learning words alphabetically and learning 20 to 30 words every day. For me, what worked was I used a lot of like flashcards. There are synonyms that are there. So basically, at the end of your lexicon, there are sets of words that mean the same thing. So you can go by that approach also. So that kind of
mm,
like satisfies this thing. But you need to make sure. So suppose if I'm doing the word lists, there are like 30 or 32 word lists that are there and 25 words per list. Suppose if I'm targeting to do like one list per day, you need to make sure that you go through the list once, see the meanings, then go through it again and cover the basically the meaning part, and then just try to remember if you can remember the meanings. And even if there is one word that you can't remember the meaning of even slightly, note it down in another notebook. So
mm,
once you're done with 2 3 lists and 2 3 days, after that just look at that notebook, which is
yeah,
going to tell you what are the difficult words, because going
mm,
through the lists again is like kind of difficult. Like you
mm,
won't go through 25 words again just to find those like 7 8 words that were difficult for you. So characterize those difficult words in each and every list, keep on revising them again and again. Trust me, it does not take more than a minute to like go through 25 words. May say agar suppose you found 10 to 12 hard, it doesn't take more than a minute for one list. So you can do this every 2 3 days where you revise. Acha, okay, word list 1 today, let's revise word list 1 ke difficult words, word list 2 ke difficult words. So that regularity and that cyclicity
mm,
is important, because after you've done with 3 4 word lists, you might forget what was there in the first one. So I think that is where it comes, that regularity in itself. So up until the last day, I was very terrified of whether what will happen and how will the
Mm.
words go. But
Right.
it went well. So, but that really depends upon how your word practice truly goes. So I think that is more important. As for reading comprehensions, I would just say that the material that is given to you is more than enough for the IMS things, and the mocks and the sites like the My IMS portal. The reading comprehensions given there will prepare you for
Mm.
that. And I just think you need to make sure. I think when most of you are attending classes, there are various types of questions that are told, like some keywords are told, like suppose something that is directly taken out of the passage, something that has to be inferred, something that has to be it's there, but you have to characterize the entire title of the thing or the entire kind of like the meaning of the passage. I think those strategies really do come in handy. And remember the different types of questions that RCs ask you. Critical reasoning, critical reasoning is something that I found really fun to practice because again, it's just like quantitative comparison. It makes you feel it's easy, but there are underlying meanings. You have to be really sort of like play detective in your mind and just go down and see what are the possible cases that this can work or this can't work and those things. So I think read your pre-class notes really well. They talk about a lot of strategies, a lot of cases, and solve everything you have really well, at least for RCs and critical reason.
Right, right. I think, yeah, so a wonderful answer where he covered what, how he went about each of the question types in GRE. So I'll just kind of paraphrase and what I picked out from it, which was a kind of learning for me as well. So identification that vocab is important to a certain extent, right? That is important, being honest with you. Though probably cramming up words was boring initially, but what has to be done, right? If you have to ace it, there are no two ways about it. And one critical thing that, Hani talked about is how you have a tendency to forget. And and again, this is an example of how not to leave any kinds of loose ends. He said even if you slightly miss it, you go back and you make a note of it because that is where your pain point is, and you keep on revisiting those, right? We call it making a cheat sheet. He talked about making a cheat sheet in the quant section as well. And the verbal with respect to the words, that's a cheat sheet for you, right? Your pain points, be aware of them, visit them regularly, because the mind does have a tendency to forget. You only need to remember till your next GRE attempt, right? So not a lifetime for you to remember words. I've forgotten many words myself that I probably crammed up once. Maybe Harneet would experience the same thing. Who knows?
I believe I have forgotten a lot of
Yeah,
them already.
already,
But
yeah, yeah. But
that's
as a strategy, I think that was wonderful how you kind of managed it. And so a flashcards was something that worked for him. Reading comprehension and being familiar with the types of questions, why that is important is because you'll get used to how to read a passage the next time. Every time you get more comfortable and you get more aware of the kind of questions that GRE can throw at you for reading comprehension. Every time you're looking out for, every time you get better at reading the passage, right, as to what you really need to scan, what is relevant, which part you really just need to skim through. Critical reasoning, towards the end, do comparison between quantitative comparison and CR. So yeah, most of the people who are good at logical reasoning would typically find critical reasoning enjoyable. So I think that was verbal reasoning section covered wonderfully. And now talking about this, you post this, obviously one enters the mock testing phase, and they say that mock analysis is even more important than writing the mock. So how did you go about analyzing your mock? What was it that you looked out for?
so you really need to keep in mind that you need to space out your mocks. Like if you're giving one mock one day, don't give it the next alternate day. Take 2 3 days to just revise whatever you've done. Go through
Right.
each and every question. Especially this thing I found good for verbal, because going back and analyzing your verbal scores makes a lot of difference. especially in RCs, consult your teachers. They are always there to help you out. They can
Right.
always help you out and say, "Ki, this RC, why is this question?" Something like that. You can always text them. They're always available.
Mm.
I think that is really important, especially for verbal, that you go through each and everything, see what are the question explanations that are given, and understand where you went wrong in the meaning. So, suppose I saw a question in the chat box right now, which says that how did you handle two and three sentences,
Right, right, right.
sentences.
Yeah.
So there, it's really important that you think logically when it's talking about a contradiction, or suppose both of the two, are they talking about the same thing? Are they related in some way, or are they talking about opposing things? What is the entire context of the sentence? I think what really works in that kind of strategy is, uh, okay, let's talk about that in the question answer section. Let's focus on the mocks right now. So yeah,
I mean,
I mean,
you can definitely kind of expand on that. That's not an issue. Yeah.
yeah. So basically, the strategy that works is fitting it by a shadow word. So this is something that I really learned in the IMS classes, was
Mm.
that when you are reading the sentence, don't look at the options at all. Just see and analyze whatever comes to your mind first, and then find the closest option that is there in the options that are given to you. That really
Right.
works, because once you've seen the options, then you'll try to fit it somewhere, which is not the correct approach. So you read the entire sentence, you gather what are they talking about, take some
Mm.
time to just think it out loud. Think कि मतलब, okay, this person is talking about this अच्छा, oh, this blank is not related to that, or it's opposite of that, or it's a synonym of that. And then you look at what might be the possible things. Is it talking about something positive or negative or neutral? These are the things that you need to say, and these are the kind of words that also come. So usually in the options you will find something that is very negative or very severe or very harsh. Don't select severe words, because very severe words are not actually are not actually make up for the options. So that is a really good strategy that I learned during IMS, was using the shadow word strategy. Coming back to mocks, as for quant as well, like there will be questions that you go wrong with. Again, see what is the explanation that is given. If suppose some question is wrong, see it again with the first, like, solve it again without seeing the explanation, and see whether you are able to see where you're going wrong. And then you see the explanation. Oh, acha, okay, this is what I did not consider, and that is
Mm.
where I went wrong.
Very
So that
interesting.
is one thing that works. Obviously, for analytics writing also, this is something that I practiced right from the start, and this was told to me in one of the IMS classes, that whenever you are giving the mocks, don't skip analytical writing, because right from the start it's important. It's very lucrative for us to leave analytical writing and skip to the just font verbal sections, but
Mm.
it's important because at the end of that hour you will be tired, very tired, because you've just typed down 400 to 600 words of two essays, 30 minutes each, and you are going to be exhausted, and that really impacts your next score. So if you built up that practice right from the start, then you know how to handle that on the final day. And a lot of us are not very experienced at typing also, so improving your typing speed is also important uh, over the time that you're practicing the mocks.
Right. So I hope that answers the question, right? Strategies with respect to blank text completion. And a wonderful point that you brought to the fore, which I felt, is really worth discussing, that while analyzing the mocks and the questions specifically that Harneet would get wrong, is obviously to identify where the gaps are. That's the first purpose. And it's actually easier said than done, because if you simply read the solution, you would understand, right? But did you actually pick out as to what was the reason why you got it wrong in the first place? To kind of, narrow down to that is something that is really important. And that would further lead to the targeted prep post a mock that is required from your own end. So one thing that, even despite though he mentions that he simply read the solutions, but before that he went about it himself and compared it and identified what was it that he did wrong. That is wonderful, and that is really the essence of mock analysis, identifying the gaps properly. As I keep on saying, it's easier said than done. Harneet did it himself, which again kind of goes on to show the kind of clarity he had throughout, even even through the mock testing phase of it. Yeah. So how many mocks did you write, Harneet?
Um, I think in total I wrote about 12 to 13 mocks.
Okay.
Uh,
Right.
yeah, simply it's important because your initial mocks will just be sort of like just fresh out of the practice phase. So
Hmm.
then you will know how to like you give 3 4 mocks, then you take a break, analyze how
Right.
you went wrong, then you give the targeted thing. Also, the thing is when you register for GRE, they'll give you 2 mocks free that come
Right.
with that.
Right.
Solve them, but don't solve them like immediately after you've registered.
Hmm.
Solve 3 4 mocks first, then solve one GRE mock,
Hmm.
analyze that properly, then solve 3 4 other IMS mocks or whatever mocks you're availing, and then
Right.
give the last GRE mock before your final test. Like, and this is something that I mentioned, that don't give anything 2 3 days near to your test. Forget studying also, it's fine. Like, relax there. So yeah, the GRE mocks, especially the official GRE mocks, this is something that I've noticed also, that uh, they'll do you very well in quant, but the quant that actually comes in the test is going to be a bit harder than that. And the verbal that GRE mocks offer is a lot difficult, and the verbal that is going to come in the final exam is going to be easier than that. So if you're doing well in say quant in the GRE mocks, if you get something above 165, again, don't get overconfident, because it's something that I did. I got a 170 in my first mock, and after that, when I gave other mocks, I realized, acha, okay, like these are definitely difficult than what the actual GRE questions are. So analyze that. Just kind of like after a good mock or after a bad mock, take some time to like celebrate that achievement, but only for like a day. Then get back to your practice again. So that's the thing that is really important. And yeah, so spacing out your mocks again is something that really helps. At least 3 4 days between each and every mock. Yeah. So
Yeah.
definitely.
So I won't ask you a question on your idea of celebration, but the idea is that if you get a great mock score, it's a good thing, but never get complacent. And
Yeah.
also GRE mocks, you must kind of place them strategically and not simply write them right away. And so covering the loose ends again was something that is important. And 12 to 13 mocks is because I think Harni talked about writing 2 to 3 mocks together and taking a few days off, and that few days is what analysis is all about, right? That you get to know some patterns about yourself, a lot of things that otherwise you would not know about yourself come to the fore, right? And probably even more so in verbal, because the questions that, especially the kinds of question that you get wrong on RC and CR otherwise, have a lot of have a lot to do with what you assume from your own end subconsciously, and it kind of leads you to going at taking a particular route and arriving at the wrong answer towards the end of it. So analysis is important. All the various things point towards that. Taking a few days off is where the analysis comes into picture, and that would lead to some post analysis practice, if I'm right, Harneet. Was it something that you did, that
Uh,
let's say after a set of 3 mocks, you kind of made a note of where you went off the track, and the days in between would be targeted towards practicing on those gaps?
yeah.
Was that the way you approached it?
Exactly. So again, like I said, that 2 3 mocks you give first. Like again, keep 3 3 days ka gap between each mock, and in those 3 days, analyze what went wrong in that specific mock. And then after that, when you take some time off, like say 15 20 days, you will focus on only what went wrong in those 3 4 mocks that you have given collectively. So what are the
Right.
concepts that you're lacking in? Suppose this is something that came up to me when I was doing my mock. Something that I lacked in was vocabulary again. So
Right.
that is when you start focusing on your vocabulary and whether you need that amount of preparation or not. Some people are like very avid readers. They'll read newspapers every day. Their vocab is bound to be generally stronger. So they will not need to focus on vocab that well. So there are other concepts that you might want to focus on. Even in math, there was a bit of like geometry that I was a little bit lacking in, and that is what I practiced later on also. So
Okay.
those 15 20 days have to be targeted to what you where you went wrong in those first 3 4 months.
Yeah. 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 I think that's a wonderful point that in spite of all the practice, the mocks might reveal a few conceptual flaws. Just address them. It's not a big deal, and you should be good to go. Yeah. So, Harneet, you, among, in this, uh, come July, there was a lot of uncertainty around when would the test centers open, right? And when would the entire process, in fact, how would it go about? You chose to go ahead with the online GRE. If you can just share your experience of writing the online GRE, because a lot of students out there really want to know what are the things that they need to be careful about, and is it an option worth taking?
So when I was first acquainted with the idea of online GRE, which was around in June or something, I completely dismissed the idea. Be
Mhm.
like, how can I give GRE at home? Concentration nahi hoga, and
Right.
a lot of things. There'll be a lot of noise and stuff. But
Yeah.
then obviously necessity was there. Like I had to get on with that, and then I started becoming used to the idea of a GRE because going out right now is much unsafer than sitting at home. So again, that's a huge thing that
Yeah.
it is definitely a worth option taking for, and it is much more convenient that you giving the center because of many reasons.
Yeah.
Firstly, it's because of the fact that you do not have anyone around you or any people around you who will be giving the same test. And I think that really matters because for me as a person, if I see like in a center there are 20, 30 other people giving the same test, there's another kind of a pressure that comes with that center related environment, which is completely different from your comfort related environment where you are the only one who's giving a test.
Much more relaxed. Yeah. 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 Great.
So, during the online GRE, there's just your webcam that is on. You can't see the proctor, you can't see yourself. It's just like giving any other mock at your home. So it's
Mhm.
just the light that is on. It's no different from giving a mock. And definitely it is a good option because a lot of people might not know this because, but the online GRE at home is 24/7. You can give it literally any time of the day. No one is going to stop you.
Yeah.
So this is something that I practice because I like studying more at night, and I
Mhm.
had given more mocks at night. And this is something that I did was I gave my actual final test at 1:30 in the morning
Wow.
because it was some time of the day where my brain feels more active. It's not something that's not a center that will give you a particular slot. So I think that is a huge advantage and a huge benefit for people who might prefer different times than the center time. So the center time is like 8 to 10, if I'm not wrong. It's very early in the morning, and people might not be used to that, or people might not be feel active at that time. So you can choose a time that is convenient to you personally.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
I think that is a huge benefit that comes to GRE at giving at home. Secondly, I think things that you need to make sure of are that your last few mocks, even if your first few mocks are targeted at practice, that's okay. But your last 3, 4 mocks need to be targeted at the experience. Now, what I mean by the experience is that you have to give it at the place that you're going to give your final test in similar environments, in everything as similar as possible. Like you don't pause your test, you give it at the same time that you're going to give your GRE, half an hour either udhar, that's okay. Um, Again, one thing that you need to keep in mind is you can't keep any papers or pens with you. You need to keep a whiteboard or like a transparent sheet with a white thing. So you need to become acclimatized to that because writing, many of you might not be used to writing on whiteboards or something, and you need to write it, erase it, like you need to know how that process works. So your last 3, 4 mocks after like aside from your practice should be focusing on your GRE experience as a whole also. So I think these are the things that you need to keep in mind, that replicate your experience as accurately as possible that it's going to be on your final day. Other than that, the ETS site has a load of instructions talking about what softwares need to be on your laptop or on your PC. Then your Wi-Fi connection needs to be really, really strong. Then there are things about where you should be sitting. There should be enough lighting, and there should be nothing visible there. There should be mirrors should be covered or something of those sorts. Are like the instructions that are given up clearly on the site. So you need to
Mm.
focus on those things. You can't be wearing something that covers your ears or something on those lines, and just that these are the basic things, but these are giving very extensively on the site. Just follow them. and I say it will be a good experience.
Right. So I think that is very, very informative. For a lot of you out there who are very skeptical, I think Harneet has summarized it very nicely. So he talked about obviously the guidelines that you need to follow, and one point specifically that he again as a part of the strategy that you must simulate the actual test environment that you would be facing. So if you're writing the online GRE, for example, a month down the line or whatever, a couple of weeks down the line, make sure that the last 3 4 mocks you practice and write on the whiteboard that you have, right? Because it might require a bit of getting used to it. If you are writing it at the center, probably try writing it at the same time at your home, or at the home obviously, because right now you won't be able to write it at the centers, but try to simulate. Don't have like a bottle of cola and a bag of popcorn when you're writing GRE. That won't do it. And one more thing that very subtly gets addressed, and if you're someone who probably is similar to Harneet in his experience, that if he were to probably write the GRE at the center, it would probably feel like an event, right? An important event which is big and huge, and comes along with that a bit of a pressure, which probably was not there when you wrote the online GRE, right? So I think that's a very important point, and I had not heard of this point. I think this is definitely something to really make a note of, yeah, because on the exam day you'll be more nervous than any other mock. That's just bound to happen, but you try to reduce it to whatever level that you can. So I think that's a very wonderful point, strategic point that Harneet mentioned. No qualms in writing online GRE, just a bit of getting used to it. It might actually play in your favor if you're someone like Harneet, right? With the relaxed atmosphere that you have, and especially if you're someone who probably is at his best or is at her best in the night time, as a lot of us engineers and other graduates are, right? So if you're someone who's the most active between 12 to 2 in the night, or even at 4 or 5 in the night, that's the way forward for you. So thanks a lot, Hani, for that. I think you covered a range of topics from the beginning when you talked about the kind of programs that you wanted to select, from your strategy towards both quantitative and verbal at all times, during classes, post class, during the mocks, how you went to analyze your mocks, and throwing some light on the online GRE as well towards the end. Before I let you go, a couple of things that I would, kind of share with our students. So now that you are done with the GRE, how are you making sure that your application looks robust, and what are the steps that you're taking in that on that front? Yeah.
So after your GRE would be done, you will definitely feel a lot relieved because most of the work you've already done. It's
Yeah.
something that your grades are already in place, most of it. So my application start like in a month. So
Mm,
my grades are taking till the second year. So grades are already done. Whatever experiences you have to have, that are already done, and GRE is already done. Something that might be left is something like an English test, like TOEFL or something that
mm,
is definitely that you can give.
yeah.
So I think your experiences really need to line up with what course you're applying. So something like I am applying for an economics course,
Mm,
and what I did during the lockdown was did like 2 3 internships at different places that focused on research and that focused on economics, and something that you can talk very uh, kind of briefly, but yet in an important part in your SOP, because that really kind of matters, because that shows that you have taken the extra effort of lining your kind of CV or your profile to whatever you want to pursue later on. So I think that is really important. As much as people would say that like the foreign universities look at the comprehensive profile, they don't look at just at your grades or your SOP, they also look at your LORs, your entire experiences. But you also need to realize that something of like a foreign university will not even consider those aspects of your application if your grades and your GRE are not up to mark.
mm,
So if your grades are in the moderate thing, then GRE becomes really, really important for you to
right.
kind of ace. And if
Right.
your grades are already good, then it's fine. Like you can still kind of relax, but obviously, again,
Mm.
don't get
Just be probably around the average mark, yeah. on
Yeah.
something like that.
So
Yeah.
again, so that is the thing. Like when they talk about a holistic profile, it needs to be good in each of those sectors. You need to have a really good SOP which is targeted towards your university where you're applying, the course that you're applying. Why do you want to do it? Make it as personalized as you can. Then again, getting good LORs from people who like know you well, rather than some person that is probably famous but does not know you well. That
Yeah.
really kind of, because a lot of us feel that acha, okay, this is like some big shot economist or some big shot person who I have known for like 1 or 2 months online also, but can write a great recommendation letter. They'll just probably ask you to write it, which is not something that is what you will want to do, right? You want someone who knows you completely, like your teacher or your professors who have you have worked with or you have known for the past 2 3 years, to write about your experiences in much larger detail. And that is something that really makes a lot of difference, to get letters of recommendation from people that you like know you well rather than you knowing them well. That is really important. And I think, yeah, let's see how the applications play out this year.
Yeah. 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 All the best for that, by the way. I'm sure that you're going to do well, especially with the kind of research and as was the case with your preparation for GRE, you haven't left any loose ends here either. So, wonderfully put towards the end as well. A few pointers, right? So, one of the pointers was being authentic in your application, like building towards it once you're done with the GRE, and having an idea as to the wholesomeness of the entire process. If you're someone who's probably lower on the grades, you need to compensate with it, probably with a better GRE score. Yeah, and one of the points that he talked about towards the end, that an LOR from a very accomplished being who probably cannot really talk about you as a person is not the ideal deal. Rather, someone who can comment a bit about who you are and how you go about your things. Yeah, so really bringing the you out and how you as a fit really would be a perfect fit for whatever program in the college that you're applying to. So that was wonderfully put, Harneet, again. So any last parting words for our students? A few tips, a couple of tips maybe that you think are the most relevant before we sign off?
I think, again, one of the most important things is to just keep in mind what you want to do, where you want to apply. And just on a lighter note, something that kept me motivated was seeing videos of foreign universities. So it's something that really kind of motivates you, because when you see where you want to go, when the target is in front of you, it really can make a lot of difference with you working for it. So motivate yourself in any way that you want to. If you want to see experiences of people studying at those universities, you can talk to people, connect with people studying, ask for their experiences of where and what they're doing and how is the course and something like that. Connections are really important. So like start, if you guys are on LinkedIn, then probably connect with 1 or 2 people who are studying there. Then you can get in like an good experience, like a first-hand sort of account of how things are run there. Because most universities will obviously glorify their courses on their sites, but it might not be something that you as a person would want also. So I think that is really important. Do your research with respect to which universities you want to target, and definitely build a solid timeline. I think that is really important. Timeline in terms of you giving your GRE, when you are going to submit your applications, when you're going to complete with your SOPs. So have a kind of like a organized procedure for that. And I think, yeah,
Yeah.
that's it.
Great. So research, dedication, and motivation. That was wonderful. So yeah, we have one question here. Please, please type in your questions either in the chat box or in the Q&A box that you'd like Harneet to talk about, yeah, or any of your queries that you might have. So please let us know. So Harneet, one of our attendees wants to know how much time should we spend in a day on GRE prep? Well, Harneet said half an hour to an hour, but let's hear from Harneet again. Yeah.
Yeah, so again, that really depends upon what is your strong suit. So if something like you really like Quant and you're familiar with Quant, then half an hour, 45 minutes would do. If you, again, like that's something that is very personalized. I would just say that it doesn't require that much of prep. You'll study 4 5 hours in a day. It's not like that. Anything from 1 to 2 hours should be enough. That also depends upon how far are you from your GRE. Because if you are starting the prep now and giving it in the next 2 months, then definitely you will have to study 1 2 hours or even a more in a
Yeah,
day.
definitely.
So when I started in February, it was a longer time because I had 4 to 5 months to prepare, and that is why the studying procedure was a bit relaxed. Definitely, when you are attending your classes, your in-house studying is going to be a little lesser, and it's going to take up when your classes are done. So
Mm.
I think that you have to manage with the classes. Yeah.
Yeah, so depends
So
on multiple factors, and it's totally a subjective thing depending on various things. So Anid, how did you go about your preparation for the AWA section? How did you ensure that you? Yeah.
I think AWA, you just need to know how to write the format of the thing, because format is most important. So when you know for a fact, when you're writing something like an issue, when you're analyzing an issue, you need to analyze from a particular perspective and do not make it like, Acha, this is also right, but this is also right. So take
Mm.
one stance on it. That is really
Mm.
important. And
Okay.
figure out like when you are writing or when you're giving the mock test or something and you're noting down the points, focus on 3 or 4 main points and build your paragraphs around that. So I think anything you can bring out from your instances, you can bring it out from books that you've read or movies that you have seen. I have used movie instances a lot of times.
Hmm.
Something that is happening in your college or your personal instance or something that is widely known to people, a lot of things.
Right.
These kind of
Right.
like contemporary examples work
Mm.
well in issue.
Mm.
For argument writing, you need to be a little more technical. You
Yeah.
need to analyze the argument. For a lot of times they ask about a business or how it's doing well, then you see, acha, okay, how this policy will increase your costs or will increase your revenues, or you have to see it from all the angles. So it's more as it says, it's more analytical. So I think when you're practicing your mocks, and when you go about it like 11, 12 mocks that you've written 11 issue tasks and 11 argument tasks. So each and every time that you're writing a mock, send out your AWAs to your teachers, ask them to grade it, and say ki how you can improve in that. So every single time do that. It might be like you might be worried that I'm like irritating my teacher by sending every 3 4 months, but believe me, they are very happy to help you guys out. So
Yeah.
send those AWA tasks. And the most important thing that came to me when I was attending my class for AWA, and that actually I faced was, you'll be very easily able to write 300 to 400 words, 300 words minimum. But that after going after that is something that is much more difficult, because that will allow you to keep on like thinking more, go deeper in points. That is where you bring out the events, that is where you bring out the examples. Because from whatever knowledge we already possess, writing an issue or writing a like essay of 300 or 350 words is going to be very easy. You just write down language and type karte karte 300 words ho jayega. But going to take it further, and that further, that gap between 300 to 450 is something that will make all the difference between your AWA points. So you
Yeah.
need to like, it only comes with practice. Start practicing and start sending out these things and making people read them, and then you analyze, acha, okay, these are the things that I can build them out with. More so, issue task is something that depends upon the question, but argument task is something that you can read sample arguments and figure out, acha, this is the language of writing. This is how I'm supposed to write. So a lot of it goes into the format for argument writing. So argument is a lot easier to score than issue, though we don't get different marks for both of them. We just get 1 mark for the analytical writing section. But I
Yeah.
think that really makes a lot of difference. Like analytical writing is much more structured, and there's a lot already in place. You just have to fill the pointers depending upon the case that you get. Issue is
Yeah.
more like thinking and abstract a little bit.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So I think that's a very in-depth and a lot of details that Harneet has covered himself. He seems to be an expert on all the three: quant, verbal, or how to write. Yeah. So quite an expert we have here with us. And last question before we sign off for the day. That's from Nandini. Is lexicon enough for vocabulary, or how did you go? Anything in addition to the lexicon that you probably did that helped you boost your vocabulary?
So again, as I said earlier, it depends upon what is your strategy, what you are kind of like familiar with doing words like. So suppose you might be more familiar with going it in an organized manner, like say A के कर लिए तीन चार lists, then B, then C, then D. So probably you might be more kind of familiar to that. That is how you'll do. Another way is of doing is synonyms that I said are in the back of the lexicon. You can group
Mm.
words together that mean the same thing. A
Yeah.
lot of time at my comes is that when you're practicing text completion and sentence equivalence from your thing, there might be words that you don't know. Note down those words also. So those things are really important. And again, so there are a lot of sources online. There are lots of ways of learning also. There are various apps and various flashcards that are there available. So you can refer to those as well if that is something that really makes your learning easier. So pick
Yeah.
out whatever is convenient to you and try out different things before making a decision. So ऐसा नहीं है कि lexicon, so most of them will cover the same vocabulary only. It's just the matter or the way of learning that will be different.
Yeah. 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 Okay. So that was wonderful. I think you've answered in a lot of detail so that it's clearer to all the students who are out there. And I hope that some of these can take up few of the things that you tried, some of the things that worked for you, and some of the things would work for anyone. I hope everyone out there has made a note of what Harneet had to share with us. A lot of points here. I would definitely share the recording of this webinar as well because it's quite informative and kind of get back on track with your prep if you're not already. Yeah. And all the best to everyone. And thank you, Harneet, for this wonderful, very informative webinar. Yeah. All the best with your application process further. And I hope you get the best in what you're doing right now. Yeah. Take care. So take care, everyone. Thank you for joining and keep on prepping. Yeah.